Welcome to the Being Human UT podcast, where Dr. Randy Jasmine and Dr. Jim Hindigus will discuss issues relative to the humanities and technology at Utah Tech University. And now your hosts for Being Human UT podcast, Dr. Randy Jasmine and Dr. Jim Hindigus.
Hello, we are back. After a brief hiatus, we are back with a new season of the Being Human Utah Tech podcast. I'm Randy Jasmine, one of your hosts, and I want to tell you that this season we're going to have a theme. We're going to have a theme for our podcast. It's still going to be centered on humanities and technology. It's still going to be centered on what's going on here at Utah Tech University. But Jim, we have a theme, yes?
Yes, we do. I think we've given up on fighting against AI, and we're just gonna have a whole series on AI. I know that it always comes up. It always is a piece of the conversations. That we have.
Just to let the listeners know, when we say fighting AI, not so much we don't want to use it. We just don't want it to be the topic of every single minute of every single podcast we have.
Yes, and so we're going to talk about AI in the classroom for this series, and so we have some wonderful guests today included that across disciplines that are going to talk about how we utilize AI in the classroom. And I think this is a really ideal time to talk about AI in the classroom because I think enough time has gone by that we are starting to figure out how are we going to really utilize this technology? Early on, it was just new. It was shocking. A lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, a lot of trial and error. But I think some time has settled, and I think we're going to figure out some really innovative ways to use AI in the classroom. So, I'm excited about this season.
Yeah, so am I. And I'm very excited about our first guest. Our first guest is from our own College of Humanities and Social Sciences. We have with us today Dr. Shariq Sherwani. He's an assistant professor in the communication department, and he has a really, really interesting background. And I'm going to read some of his credentials, and you'll see that there's a lot of experience that Dr. Sherwani has in a lot of different fields. He received a PhD and an MA from Ohio University, an MA CPR and an MBA from Ohio State University. His MS and his BS degrees are from Aligarh Muslim University. He pursued graduate studies at Harvard. And this is what I find most interesting, and perhaps he can talk a little bit about this as he begins. Prior to pursuing a career as a scholar focusing on health communication and organizational communication, Shariq worked as a scientist for more than 2 decades at major academic institutions, including Ohio State, Ohio University, and Harvard. So, Shariq, you bring to your time here at Utah Tech as a communication professor a very long career and a lot of experience in science. And tell us a little bit about how that informs the way that you approach teaching communication.
Well, let's not forget University of Cincinnati, go Bearcats.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you so much, Randy and Jim, for inviting me on this podcast this morning. And thank you so much for your very gracious, very generous introduction. So for me, the question, my scientific background and my present occupation for the last 10 years in humanities, how do the two jive together? It's a no-brainer for me. Even though I was and am trained in precision data, measurements, voice of medicine, and evidence-based medicine. That was my background. That was my training and work for about 2.5 decades in the U.S. specifically. And so for me, having that bent of mind, having that understanding, what science looks like, what medicine and biomedical research looks like, specifically on the diseases that I was working on, diabetes and sleep apnea. So and also neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, particularly. What does that look like? So for me, it was like a no-brainer. So basically, and no pun intended, it was no-brainer moving into humanities. For me, artificial intelligence and all that it caters to is really a perfect and the right fit, because now, for the last about a decade or so, I'm looking at, what in the last 3 years or so, particularly, what AI can do to humanity, to us as humans. How can it humanize what we are trying to study as a researcher for me? What am I trying to teach in the classroom, and what my students are trying to learn? Now, how does it cater to humanity? Not just the why of AI, which is science, data, coding driven, but the how. What communities are allowed to be a part of the space of AI? What communities are still vulnerable and kind of like still on the margins? So this is what I look at when I particularly am planning to design certain exercises, certain teaching, components of my classes. Like, how is this happening in the background, and what the front facing is. The front facing in humanities is very important to me, but of course, one kind of like caters to the other.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes so much sense, and appreciate that. Just quickly before I turn it over to Jim for question number one, I was very remiss there. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a big fan of the city of Cincinnati. And as a neutral, I say go Bearcats too. So of all the ones to miss, I shouldn't have missed Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
you did great. You're fine.
You did great.
Yes.
So Shariq, I'm excited to kind of hear more about how you have developed your sort of AI pedagogy and your approach. Could you describe your ideas about keeping AI development ethical? That's kind of an exciting topic to talk about, and just aligned with human values.
That's a really good question. Thank you, Jim. In fact, for me, as a professor in humanities, specifically in communication, as someone who teaches a course titled Ethics in Communication, and I've been doing that at Utah Tech. This is my 5th year here, and I've been teaching it from year one. So for me, AI is at the center of ethics. So students who are basically planning to go into law school, for example, and even medicine, nursing, and all that, and business, they heavily are focused on taking this course. So for me, it's really important to make sure that the way my teaching pedagogy specifically is organized is actually incorporates the activities and the exercise in the classroom. So, for example, talking about, like, I would have some sort of a case study, for example, wherein the students would pick a specific topic from the ethics and communication course, particularly whether it comes to deontology, whether it comes to duties or consequences. What I do in the classroom is actually I have them, and I'll talk a little bit more in medicine as well when I give those examples, but particularly in the ethics class, I actually have them have a real life conversation wherein, for example, ChatGPT, one of the most commonly used apps in my classrooms among the students, even though it's not the only one. And I discourage them from, not necessarily to discourage them, but like, let's look at Perplexity. Let's look at, Google Gemini as well. Let's give a little flavor to everybody. So coming back to the, talking about ethics, coming back to the activity component of my classroom, for example, have them speak using ChatGPT as the responder for utilitarianism, for example, which is the common good for the greatest number of people. Now, or I'll have them ChatGPT play as Kant, like what would Kant do? So basically, they're getting back into history and leaning into characters or philosophers or historians who have basically provided their writings, their sayings and writings, and their books have been written on them. So basically, they are playing and asking these questions back and forth as if they are in front of them. So it becomes really important that my students are able to go beyond just the prompt for the activity in the classroom to kind of have different voices. So this is like a hands-on applied activity. And I would still like to talk a bit more about the ethical aspect of AI. So for me, it's really important in the classroom and for me as a researcher and a scholar that all the voices are heard. One of the issues, and we can talk a little bit more about this later, but I just want to sprinkle this a little bit. One of the issues with AI, and just like with any technology or any approach to humanity, is the issue of certain historically marginalized and vulnerable populations being left behind. So how do we bring in those voices? Are those voices immersed in the conversations? Are those voices immersed in the responses from these agentic AI bots, the chat bots? And who the coders are? Because like the coders are almost like in the background kind of people or I don't want to point a finger, but like as if it's like somebody's driving the cause. Like what is their ethical approach to humanity? Do they see humanity as being equivalent across the globe, for example? So those are some of the concerns for me, which really pertain directly to the ethical implications of AI. And we can talk a little bit more beyond this.
If I could follow up there, I love your response, and it really puts me in mind of kind of the balance or the tightrope that I see within my discipline, having to walk. Jim and I teach composition, teach academic writing, but I also teach literature, and really my biggest fear right now, and watching the development of agentic AI, is I fear that the voices that say, you know what, reading is really something of the past. AI can read for you now. You don't need to read long books. You don't need to read documents that are long. AI can summarize that for you. And, obviously as a professor of literature, I don't particularly like that idea. But at the same time, as you were talking about the voices that have been excluded from conversations and what's the goal that's being established here? Well, in the field of literature, the Western canon is a voice, right? The Western canon is a voice, and for the last at least half a century and beyond, we've tried to challenge that idea. And I'm thinking of the work of Franco Moretti and his idea about distant reading, saying nobody's going to read everything. You can't. And so technology can help bring in some of those voices, even if we can't apply to every single one of those voices the Western idea of close reading. And so I really like that idea. If we can strike a balance between saying to our students, hey, when you find the important voices and you find the voices you want to focus on, you've got to read them and you've got to understand them. You've got to read them in their entirety. But agentic AI can be this agent for helping you see a lot of different voices that you just would gloss over if you weren't taking that approach. So I appreciate those comments.
So, well, thank you. That's really a whole lot to unwrap there.
I apologize.
No, that's all right. In fact,
my mind started going.
Oh, this is beautiful. So, let's try to unwrap one layer at a time. So this is very exciting for me too. This idea that somehow, this artificial intelligence is somehow going to put at obey the professors of English, for example, or philosophy or sociology or communication, which is my area. This is actually not, even if you look at the top 10 careers which could be in jeopardy, it's not really creating fear. Even the search engines are not, it's very nice, they're not creating a fear. It's like we just need to cater to different aspects of this technology. So professors of English are not in them. So first of all, let's not worry about it, number one. Secondly, going back to your question about the different voices, and this is really personal to me because, colonialism is problematic, as we all know. And colonialism is not just the militaries or the navies and the air forces and all that, and the lands and all that. It's the colonialism of the mind.
Sure.
And historically, certain continents, certain cultures, certain countries, certain regions within the same countries, and certain other demographic, when you come down to the 12, 15 demographics, like, do you have a degree? Do you not have a degree? Do you belong to a certain faith? Do you not belong to a certain faith? And of course, the typical race, ethnicity, gender, sex, however you want to look at these two. So, those demographics have always been marginalized. But looking from a bird's eye view as to whose voices are heard and whose voices are silenced. And why are they heard and why are they silenced? What is really interesting, and this for you gentlemen being professor of English would be very appealing, the words and the terms that we use throughout the world, certain wars are certain these fights are termed as wars, while others are battles, certain ethnic cleansing, while others are tribal. So when you say it's a tribal issue, then suddenly we have dismissed that issue by saying, oh, it's the tribal thing. First of all, we have already dismissed it, making it smaller, localized, limited. It's very common within that community. It's expected within that community. We don't really need to go in and help them out because it's a tribal thing. So when I put in so when the larger conversation is immersed in these kinds of words and terms and terminology, so the search engine, Google and the likes, and then the AI are going to basically cater the responses based upon whatever is available to it and to them. And this basically brings in the larger question about the voices, about marginalization and all that. So this is a deeper conversation that we really need to have. It's interesting that a lot of coders are from, Asian countries, particularly India and China, and yet the responses are immersed in a very Eurocentric, English-speaking response. And I have some examples I can share with you in a few minutes, but it's interesting. The coders are sitting, majority of them, we know that in the Silicon Valley, and yet the responses are very imperialistic, from a colonial viewpoint and a voice, a very dominant, English-speaking, white majority dominant voices. So, it's like as if we have this new technology, yet we are still living in the 1850s, 1950s, and all that. The same ideologies continue, yet the means and the modes and modalities are different today. So there's a larger conversation to be had in these spaces because we cannot blame AI. Like, I'm not willing to blame AI for this. What is happening at the back end, AI is basically, as we are training the language model, of course, and when I'm on it, and I've trained my students too, to also, even when they have received their so-called answer and they're done for that activity, I usually encourage them to give a thumbs up to ChatGPT to kind of tell good job. So that because
positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement. Thank you. So we are trying to kind of like train, and there's the idea, it's the human-machine interaction. So there was a lot to unwrap. I'm sure I've missed one or two aspects of it, but I don't have the right answers. I think nobody has the right answers because we're pulling from history. We're pulling from philosophy of thousands of years, and we are basically pulling from the technology of today. So that's exactly where we are localized. The dominant voices and the supposedly silenced voices, which refuse to be silenced. Sure. They're kind of like making their ways, but they're not in those spaces. So to say, they don't have the seat at the table yet.
Well, and I think we're highlighting probably the most exciting but also challenging aspects of AI that I'm noting right now. This idea, going back to talking about how your students are using AI as a conversation tool. And what I'm seeing right now, and what we've been talking about, the challenges are, is that conversation diverse? Is it just, are they actually interacting with voices across multiple spectrums, or are they just interacting with a dominant voice? And is it accurate? And I think those are the challenges that I see with our students, because can they recognize that they're not interacting with a voice that is diverse, or can they recognize that they are interacting with a dominant voice, and can they recognize if they're interacting with a voice that is accurate? Because I know this is actually creeping up a lot more again, is the concept of hallucinations, which I thought was, I didn't think it was gone, but I thought that ChatGPT and all the AI generators were getting smarter, the hallucinations were less frequent, but I'm actually seeing that happening a lot more. Some people are just figuring out that the concept of hallucinations are happening. So not only do you have these dominant voices, but then you have these dominant voices that will point to sources that don't exist. And what I'm always hoping with our students is that they can recognize that. And I always think it's one of our mission to tell them to challenge that. And so I don't know if you encounter that in the classroom where students are just accepting the dominant voice or just accepting an inaccurate source in those conversations. Do you?
Oh yes, thank you. That's a brilliant and several layered question. And again, this is where I'm going to start at the start. So this is, are the students seeing other voices as well? Are the students seeing is one thing, what appears to them? Are they looking for them actively and proactively? This is where the onus falls on us as instructors, as professors. We need to build in assignments wherein we need to make sure that other voices are immersed in those responses. Because AI is a friendly technology, but it actually works as we want it to work. It's really about this conversation, this interaction back and forth. So we need to have that extra aspect of the assignment wherein the students, even if these are young students, I mostly cater to and teach undergraduate students. So their expertise and knowledge is limited. I'm not talking technology wherein they're like really, really good, but the overall knowledge is limited. And this is why they're in my class, because I'm trying to teach them to think for themselves, to actually go beyond what the prompt is, what the question of the assignment or the activity is. So basically, bringing in diverse voices falls as an onus, is falls on the instructor, and I take that responsibility very seriously. So typically, the voices are not there. Mm-hmm. The diverse voices, are not there typically. But I am not disheartened by it because I already know, and I've been training at whatever little I can do in the larger sphere of AI. I've been doing that. I'm training ChatGPT, for example, on my own, but so are my students. And I'll give you an example in a moment. So that's one aspect wherein the professors, the teachers, no matter what level you are at, they need to cater to those requirements. Number one. Secondly, what is also important is that when the students are doing these activities or interacting for larger individual assignment or group assignments, for example, it's really important for them to bring in on their own think beyond. Like, for example, in my going back to ethics in my ethics and communication class, I intentionally, not that I have anything against it, I have certain things that I will kind of like bring it up, not to push any kind of an agenda, but basically to have my students think a little bit outside the box, so to say, to avoid that cliche, but wherein I will give example. I'll say, who's your favorite athletes? And typically the responses are Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. I'm like, oh, so I usually bring in women athletes. Not that I have an agenda. For me, who's the best tennis player? They'll say something like Serena Williams. Just what basically kind of like training my students in the thought process. They don't have to choose Serena Williams, for example, because that's not her. They're best tennis player. It's perfectly all right. But Serena Williams could be. So just having those voices. So when we talk about philosophers, we don't have to jump to Aristotle and Isocrates and Socrates and all that. We can go to Avicenna. We can go to Averroes. We can go to, other philosophers from older or younger cultures. So this is where I usually would bring in an extra element in that, or require them to cater to the extra element in the prompt. And so this is one aspect. Going back to some of the mistakes or errors that you were talking about when students are doing activities and all that. This past week in my patient and provider communication class, the actual title is Provider and Patient Relations class. I actually had my students in groups. I have 4 groups in my class. Had my students design a brochure. So I actually took printed copies from American Cancer Society of 8 different cancers, brochures on 8 different cancers. I laid them out. I said, come over, one representative from the class, from each group, come over, grab a sheet that you like. I had them upside down so they couldn't tell. And even if they could, it wasn't a part of the activity anyway. So they all grabbed one each, 4 were left behind. I says, review it in your group for a few minutes. Then pull, either you can highlight, underline, whatever, pull some of the prominent highlights about this particular cancer, like colorectal cancer, ovarian cancer, whatever that group got. I says, input that into your chatbot of choice, and out of 4, all 4 had ChatGPT. So go ChatGPT. But so input this, and the prompt was design, instead of a 2-page back and forth, design 1-page brochure. So the designed brochure, the human design brochure from the American Cancer Society, was to be read at the 12th grade level. I said, instead of 2, make it 1. Instead of 12th grade, make it 8th grade. And so you have all this information. They all did that. This is where I threw in the caveat. I said, now ask ChatGPT to translate that into a language which is different than English of your choice. So some students, one group chose French, one chose Dutch, one chose Spanish, and one chose German. And I, just for good measure, chose Arabic. So what was interesting is that in my translation, it was translated beautifully to Arabic, but images were Western. And this is where the conversation back and forth goes. So I could very easily say that, make the images aligned with the culture or the language. So no problem. I don't attack ChatGPT. ChatGPT and I are friends. We hang out. We tell each other, we teach each other, and we learn from each other. And sure enough, ChatGPT did that. I was telling my students what I could easily also request. Let's say if I go to elementary school, they invite me. hey, Shariq, would you come in and kind of talk a little bit about health communication at the 5th grade level to our 5th graders? We have 2 classes, whatever. I go in there, instead of the adult images in those brochures, I would have the images of young children. So either their mom and dad or their caregiving adults or some kids with hanging out with each other, 2, 3 images. So it caters to that. In this example, and I'll share about the errors in a minute, but that's the third part of your question. Thankfully, I remember now all the layers. so you can. This allows you in real time to do these things, and then you can take this knowledge information, because otherwise these pamphlets you have to go through a whole lot of process. They're not going to be available in medical textbooks, for example, from that perspective, or in magazines, the old-fashioned traditional media. You can do it in real time, print, digital, however you want to, and you can modify so many things. So that's the power of this kind of technology, this kind of modality for me. And for my students, they can say it was fascinating. I wish I could have given them half an hour. I give 20 minutes. They were still talking. It was when our students are talking, no matter what level, when they're conversing, it's our time to kind of disappear, take a backseat. I usually walk around to go to each table, whatever. But they are really engaged. And this is the joy. And I have a lot of joy as I'm describing this activity from my recent class from Thursday. And finally, to go back to the errors. Some of the errors are blatant. I cannot believe that in 2025, with ChatGPT, when I started at Utah Tech, I am an early adopter of technology, not just AI, but otherwise too. I'm an early adopter. Maybe that's my MBA background from Fisher College of Business at the Ohio State University. Go Buckeyes. But having that training, so I'm an early adopter. I don't run away from technology. I started using technology before you amazing hosts had mentioned that most of the universities were kind of like, checking those waters, dipping their toes and seeing. And I've been using it since November 2022, literally when ChatGPT 3.5 version first came out. So some of the errors are blatant. Out of 4 groups from my Thursday's class, provider and patient communication class, there were 2 errors. One, so the large TV screen on which I was portraying the slide as they were sending it to me in real time, and I was showing group A, I had their brochure designed 1 page, 8th grade level. I glanced over on my right shoulder. I'm like, oh, where's your second language brochure? That is the Dutch brochure. I look, because my eyes at my eye level had caught one section, not just 1 word or 2 words, all 3 bullet points in that section were in English. Everything else was Dutch. So clearly, our dear friend ChatGPT either skipped or forgot completely to translate that also. So that came through as well. And this is where the beauty, talking about professors of English or other disciplines in humanities, including philosophy, is like our jobs are going to be there till eternity, till the next technology comes in 50 years or something. So basically proofreading, editing, and this was such a great teaching moment for me in the classroom. I'm like, aha. So you all are seeing this in real time. They're like, oh. And we all went, oh, because we didn't expect that it would be this blatant. This was one example. The second example of an error was smaller, another language, and I don't think it has anything to do with language. It could be in Arabic, it could be in Spanish. We happened to pick this one in Dutch and the other one in French. And that had nothing to do with the language. There was instead of saying check your blood pressure, it says geek, Geek, geek your blood pressure. Oh. And I because I review, we all do articles for various publications and books and all that. My eyes are almost always just very quick. And I'm the one who basically picked on both of them. So it's like, geek your blood pressure. Well, it doesn't work that way. So this is where we come in as professors and guide them. And as we guide the language machine learning of, for example, ChatGPT, and we train our students to basically review and revise and edit, I think it's going to be a more beautiful final product that we all can enjoy, learn with, and cater to. So those are some of my responses to your layered question.
Well, thank you. Are you
Yeah, I was gonna jump in with the next one. Did you have a follow-up?
no, it's
Okay.
fantastic.
I think this kind of segues nicely into our next question, and it reflects a theme that has come up time and time again when on this podcast we've talked to professors about students' use of AI, and that is, what are the students' attitudes? How would you assess your students' attitudes towards AI-enhanced assignments and learning? Because I know for me, what I try to advocate for is honesty. Just honestly tell me what you're using, what and how you're using AI. I have assignments specifically where I like you were describing just now, where I have them use AI right there in the classroom. But like I was saying to you before we started recording, that I often tell them, in the final stages of editing a draft and getting something ready to submit, use AI to look for potential writing issues. But I want them to be honest, and I want them to tell me not only here's how I'm using AI, but here's what I think about it. So in your experience, what do you find is your students' response to AI-enhanced and AI-focused assignments?
That's a great question. In fact, when you started kind of describing the theme and the background, then leading to the ultimate question, one of the points from your earlier question actually triggered my memory, which I had missed answer at that point, but this ties in nicely because earlier you had mentioned that students sometimes are afraid that lest they be accused of plagiarism and cheating.
Right.
And this ties in with that. I've seen in my classroom three kinds of students. The last one very similar to what you described, plagiarism. They're afraid of that, and I'm going to address that in a moment. So the first category of students is very similar to me in the sense that they're very enthusiastic about AI. So they're early adopter. They're all about AI. Yet, just like 18 to 22-year-old students, which is typically the ages of my students, they need guidance. And they are excited. It's almost like they think of ChatGPT and related chatbots as like big brother or grandmother, grandfather of Google search or any other search engine. But they're so much more powerful than that. So these are, enthusiastic students who are like excited and dying to use that. And they're just waiting for that trigger when they have a professor saying, guess what? We're going to be using AI this semester in this course. They're like, other professors are telling us we can't use AI. So the onus falls a little bit on the professor to train our students. Not only am I training my students, not only am I training AI, but also I'm training my students. What I mean by that is the ideas behind prompt engineering. So it falls on me because my class is focused on health communication or community health communication or provider-patient communication. I really don't have inbuilt time to train my students in prompt engineering.
Right.
But
right.
I have to because I take it as an extra joyful responsibility wherein, like, how are you going to go back and forth with this chatbot, for example? So it's really important to train them, even though I'm not from other STEM program or something wherein somebody's teaching a whole course on prompt engineering. But it's my responsibility, and I take it quite seriously as a professor, that I train them how to kind of like think like AI, and because particularly when we're involved in building this language model together. So that's one kind of student, very enthusiastic, needs little guidance and a little bit catering too. The second kind is the second category of students is basically those students who are willing to because required, who are willing to. because it's required. The professor says you must do this, or run this draft by AI and review it and see where the sentence construction was awry, for example, or the usage was not appropriate, or the voice was, very streetwise. Voice was very literary. So depending upon how the prompt or the activity requirement is, the rubric requirement is from the professor, they're willing to do that because they have to. And these students are also good at using technology. My students, the age that I cater to, they're like really savvy at using technologies because they've been born with technology. So that's not even an issue. And the third one is, this ties in with your earlier question, is very skeptical, not of the technology, because of the unclear guidance and guidelines from the professor. And this is where we need to do a lot of work together. We as professors need to have clear-cut guidelines where the students are unafraid and use this technology unafraidly if we so require them to use it. The issues of plagiarism and cheating are prominent in their minds because we are sending mixed messages. And I can see as to why these messages can be mixed, because in certain subject areas, in certain disciplines, it's a go, while in others it's a no. So students, they're taking 6 courses per semester, 7 working. It's quite common for students to work part-time, full-time, whatever. So they're catering to a lot of things. They keep forgetting which professor requires what. So these are 3 categories of students. And maybe later, I'll just touch upon this right now because it's really important. One of the pluses of engaging my students with artificial intelligence is basically the inclusivity that I get to have, that I get to bring into my classrooms for my neurodiverse students. So neurodiversity is not something that a student has a certificate for, or they may not even want to share their disability because it's not a disability, because there is no certification for it. So AI allows me, and I'll be happy to, if you gentlemen want me to talk a little bit more about this, but suffice to say that AI allows me to, without having my students stand out unnecessarily, because at this vulnerable age, in the late teens and early 20s years, students want to be a part of something larger, group-based, but they also don't want to stand out. It's that age, And college is such a high school is too, definitely, but college is also such a formative time. And I come from that as a humanities professor. I come from this place where I want the students to kind of like be together with each other and stand out when they want to themselves. So I'll be happy to speak more about my experiences with neurodiverse students and how I use this AI technology, specifically catering to neurodiverse students, and of course, generally to the general student body as well.
It would be nice to hear about that, and I think we should ask about that. I just wanted to add to what you were saying, and when you're talking about the 3 types of students, and what I often see, or at least my practice as a teacher, is that I want to motivate them to be curious, and hopefully I can address every type of student, because I do see all 3 of these students in my classrooms. And how going back to this conversation aspect of interacting with ChatGPT, do you find that even the most skeptical students, it ignites a degree of curiosity in them, which I always think maybe that can combat the skepticism, the dishonesty, the let's just get this class over with the easiest possible way without thinking. Do your activities ignite this sense of, I mean, you even kind of alluded to this joy of engagement. I can imagine that there is that capability for curiosity to really be encouraged in these students. Do you see the curiosity come through them?
Oh, absolutely. Even with the third category of student who are skeptical, and I don't like using, we have to use these words, but like for me, it's more about what Randy was talking about earlier. And what you alluded to, the honesty and the dishonesty of using technology to your advantage just for the heck of it. We can get the assignment and then get the assignment over with, the class over with, get a grade, move on. I think, again, the responsibility falls upon the professor, or no matter what grade we are teaching, or the teacher. And even the most skeptical students, once they have, and this is the beauty of it, and teaching college students, once they have the clarity of instructions and the approach to instruction, they know they're not going to be penalized because the professor is telling them to use it and giving clear guidelines. And I'll share 3 of my clear guidelines from my capstone project, which are actually written as part of the instruction. We don't have the policy for that, as we were alluding to early on. Universities are almost there. We're getting there still. So, but I have my own policies the rubric instructions. So once they have clarity of guidance and guidelines and instruction and the rubric, they shine. So back to your point, even those students who were, because remember, because this last category of students is skeptical, is concerned about plagiarism, being accused of plagiarism, or unethical behavior, dishonesty, or cheating, once they have the guidelines, they're as good in technology use as the early adopters. And that's the point I want to make. And bring in, for good measure, neurodiverse students. They're as good as the technologically savvy or early adopters or enthusiastic students. So catering to the class in the classroom becomes very easy, because now you've established the guidelines, you established the instruction. Going back to your point, Jim, about enthusiasm in the classroom, oh, very much so. Oh, absolutely. As long as the activity is not in the gray and the blurry area, as long as the activity is clear and you are available in the classroom, or even for my online classes, 2 of the classes this semester I'm teaching are online, which is ethics in communication and organizational communication and system dynamics. So even for those, students are using AI, because there I have to be really engaged. So I am on our course learning system, which is Canvas at Utah Tech University. I'm on it several times a day, not just every day, but several times a day, and not just on a weekly basis. I'm actively engaged, because the clarifications about the instruction and the guideline that my in-person class students can have with me in the classroom, I want to cater that as much as possible for my students, or for my online students, because there the issue is, whom do we ask? Funnily, they could ask ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is not Professor Sherwani, because then they're afraid of well, ChatGPT responded to this, Gemini did this, and Leonardo did that, and Cloud did that. But what is Professor Sherwani requiring? So once they have clarity, they're really excited, actually. And I have so many examples that I can share, but they're really engaged. And I sometimes have an activity and that's it, whatever the instructions I have in it. In the in-person classes, I will keep adding a layer to that. Now do this. For example, in the previous example, translate in different language, change the images. It was 8th grade, bring it to the elementary school level. So that sort of thing. And then let's move it to a different culture. So for me, and this goes back to our early conversation about which voices are heard and represented, which are silenced. I'm always teaching, almost intentionally giving examples which a regular student, and regular is not a code for anything. It's not that I'm trying to use regular for something, like a typical student in my classroom is not even thinking. For example. So this, like, they get really enthusiastic about this, really enthused and very excited about using these activities, doing these activities, sometimes individually, but most of the time these are group activities because we are still learning about this newer technology. So when they interact with each other, when they run ideas with each other and then bring in the machine learning, it really evolves into something. In every class, there are several aha moments. Even though the example that I gave, geek your blood pressure or check your blood pressure, it was an aha moment on the negative side.
Right.
It similarly, when everything was in Dutch, but that little paragraph, I'm forgetting what section that was. Those 3 bullet points were in English. Like, aha, so the idea of training and learning together. And it's still, I think, both machine and humans are still learning about each. In some areas, we have made tremendous progress. In others, we are still learning with each other.
And I like how you really tie this all together with how we as instructors have to approach AI, because I think you're highlighting one of the issues that happened early on was that the students looked to us and they said, well, how are we going to use this? And we just had deer and headlights. We weren't sure how to use it. And it is kind of like for years we tried to figure out how to use a textbook or a text in the classroom. It's another element of learning, and it's a very static element. And now we have this very dynamic element with AI, which is almost like another teacher in the classroom that we have to train the students how to interact with. And so that is very challenging, but I mean, it's very exciting. It's the possibility of having our students, through our guidance, be able to achieve more learning, achieve more understanding, and I mean, that's where my optimism's at, Randy, because I'm always sitting in pessimistic zones.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. That's very upbeat and very, and you feel better when you're optimistic about things. You feel better about teaching. You feel better about your students, and I'm very glad to hear that.
And talk about optimism. That's actually the word that I use in my classroom, which you mentioned, partnership. When the students come into each semester, week 1, we are going through syllabus, walking them through the class policies and all that. And when I say class policies, I'm not talking just AI, just general policies. When I mention AI, it's not just to be with it and all that. Look at us, we're using AI. I tell them AI is just going to be another teacher in the classroom and another student in the classroom. Because remember, I'm training and we are training and my students are training AI. So somehow a student or a group in my class has gone back and forth with AI, with ChatGPT, even if something as simple as a thumbs up or great job or excellent, it has been recorded in the information superhighway, in this cloud of information that we have. So that's at the smallest level, that's training AI. So I use AI as a partner in my classroom, not necessarily just something different, a different modality, but really catering to the way I teach as an extra partner for me. Because as a human being, I'm limited in my knowledge. So I bring in technology to help supplant that knowledge, to help me increase that knowledge. Yes.
Well, the hardest part of this job is to say, wow, we have to stop this great conversation. And it has been a great conversation. Thank you so much to Dr. Shariq Sherwani for sharing those ideas about, a really exciting, positive, and innovative way of using AI in the classroom. We appreciate that. And, maybe we can have you back again and we can continue to talk. I know you touched on neurodiverse students, but that's a topic maybe for another podcast. But thank you so much for your time and for your insights into this. We are going to continue this series. So join us for our next podcast where we'll have another Utah Tech professor talking about how they use AI in the classroom. And hopefully it will be just as stimulating and exciting a conversation. And Jim, maybe you'll continue to be positive.
I'm going to try.
Thank you, gentlemen.
This has been the Being Human UT podcast with Dr. Randy Jasmine and Dr. Jim Hindigas. Please follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. From Utah Tech University, this is the Being Human UT podcast. This has been a production from a podcast studio.